Well, good afternoon, fellow PMI team members. Welcome to the January 2022 edition of our Lunch and Learn. Happy New Year to everybody. I hope everyone got through the holidays safe and healthy. And we're on to 2022. So today, um, we are going to talk about managing remote and distributed teams. George Freeman is joining us today from sunny Florida, and he will be talking through about the managing remote and distributed teams. George has had 4 decades of experience working as a project professional across various industries in many countries and cultures. He's a project management thought leader and is a featured author in PMI's projectmanagement.com. And that's where you may know him for his humorous and borderline counterintuitive views that he uses to challenge our profession to newer and greater heights. So with that, welcome, George.
Well, thank you, Brian, and everyone for that introduction. On a personal note, I actually just love Idaho. My family and I lived there back in the early 90s in Pocatello, and after which we moved to the Seattle region, to Chicagoland, and dumped off the kids when we empty nested. And just recently, we left the snow and moved to the Boca Raton area in Southeast Florida. So thank you. Over my 4 decades of experience, I've spent nearly half of those years working with remote and distributed teams. In fact, it was my experience in these environments where I like to say I contracted a condition known as the PIT, PIT, project-induced trauma. You may relate to that. Although jokingly stated, the time that I spent in this pit is what largely inspired the strategies that I would be presenting to you today. Now, in my lessons learned articles and webinar, I often refer to myself as the battle-hardened project manager. So to start the presentation, I thought we would do a little exercise. We have a couple exercises actually. And we're going to look at what does that mean from my point of view to be battle-hardened. Okay, so first up, reflective thought gets spoken. When you are battle-hardened and you're considering that larger context and implications of a problem, a microphone really seemingly manifests itself in your head, and without premeditation, your mouth starts broadcasting your thoughts. Anybody relate to that? This is normally advantageous when you're problem solving, but I would recommend you nix that when you're presenting to your steering committee, which is a bit of a hard lesson learned that I had. You can assign your gray hairs to your project events. And in my case, when your hairs turn all gray, you really don't care anymore. Being wrong is just part of the process of getting it right. And this one stands to reason. You recognize there is another category of skill beyond hard and soft. And this really refers to leveraging traditional skills really in non-traditional ways, or maybe better stated, stepping out of the project manager box, which is something that I am a bit advocate for in just about everything that I do when appropriate. This one you will find out throughout my presentation. Challenge is your favorite word, but a little warning though. And the other George, you may relate to this one. When you're working with different cultures, this word does not translate very well. And unless you want to see a fight or flight response or some other responses, you better set the context before you use the word challenge. Many lessons learned on that one. User stories take on a completely different meaning. This is when a story about a user becomes the featured topic of a lesson learned that you recognize you just cannot dare document. and you recognize surrendering is not the same as defeat. I like to say that project managers are commissioned agents of change. Unfortunately, the fear of change, I looked this up, metathesiophobia, is a condition that is prevalent, obviously, amongst reluctant stakeholders. Now, the primary symptom of this disorder is manufactured narratives. In other words, a battle-hardened PM recognizes that their projects and themselves will come under attack when they are that spearhead of change. So instead of consuming the negativity and then responding in kind, a battle-hardened project manager will strategically maneuver to accomplish their objective, and they just surrender to the fact being the spearhead of change has some consequences. And then the last one is patterns are all you see because you've seen it all before. So when battle-hardened, you see patterns, not just the one-off problem or concern. And since those patterns, you have seen them before, you know how to respond to them. So you have resolutions on hand for that which is ailing your project because, again, you've seen it all before. So in my experience, most PMs, especially those who have managed remote and distributed teams for a while, for a few years, will identify with this. Or enterprise cross-functional project managers. Those are the groups normally that I see relating to this. But I've done polls like, we're going to do a poll right now, if you could release that.
Yeah.
I want you to identify which one of these you feel you most relate to.
Yeah, so team, if you would take a look in the polls section on your right-hand menu under the session area. The first poll has all of these items listed. So just answer the first one, pick one of them, and then click show results, and it'll record your vote. So I'll give everybody a few minutes to pick one. Or not a few minutes, a few seconds to pick one, and then we can... All right.
So I have to vote too, right? Yeah.
We're getting some votes in. George, you can vote if you like. You don't have to.
Yeah, I just did.
Okay.
I see that being wrong is just part of the process of getting right.
Yeah. So, yeah, you can see the poll results. So yeah.
Cool. Okay, so let me navigate back. Now, before we get into our main subject, let's do one more exercise. So it goes without saying that in practice, there is no single template that describes the functional role of a PM. In addition, we have no title limitations in our field. In fact, almost every project manager that I've known, has not had a PM title in their career. There's some, but it's really the majority carry a different title, and that's been true for me as well. With that said, what's more interesting to me is the project management style. What style do you use most often? So let's take a look at who are you as a project manager and learn something a little bit about ourselves. And at the end of the list, we'll do a poll again to see which one you most identify with. So the first one up is the business domain expert. This is your traditional business SME or executive coming over and being the project manager of the project. They have the knowledge, and that it obviously helps them in the process of working through domain issues. You have the coach style. They keep apprised of all activities, looking for opportunities to coach team members to success when facing hurdles. Their desire, obviously, is to make a difference at the personal and project level. The executive style. This is the prototypical style, right, from the PM BOK. So they demand a high degree of empowerment to take on a project. They usually have a strong personality. They're influential. They're a good leader. And they rely on information filtering up, right, to them in order to make project decisions. The manager style, they focus primarily on making sure the necessary resources are brought to bear on the project, and they enforce methodology with a strong hand. They have faith in that methodology that it will take care of itself largely. Then, of course, we have our next gen PMs. They usually have like a 1-year experience behind their belt. Maybe they're not so interested in finding their niche, but they want to learn everything they can about the profession. And this is the dreaded philosopher architect style. They're normally a key member of the PMO. They review approaches and practices coming before it. And of course, they like to challenge the project managers on the PMO team to make sure that they're doing their job. They're pragmatists. They're focused on getting the job done. And of course, they're not afraid of mixing it up, and if it's necessary, right? Some of these individuals you may view as a cowboy gunslinger or cowgirl gunslinger, but in reality, they're only interested in managing risk, not a pristine project. They're not so concerned about that. The process specialist is highly respected for their technical project management skills and their ability to keep everyone on track. They normally stay on the periphery of the project activities, right? Engaging leads and the SMEs as needed. The soft skills expert, you've probably all been to seminars about PM soft skills. They engage team members regularly, leveraging those soft skills to get project knowledge. And they believe, of course, that caring for the needs of the team lays the path to success. And the last one is the technical delivery expert. They obviously understand the technical domain. They can speak the vernacular, and of course, they can be in a position to solve those problems. Okay, let's go ahead and kick off this poll.
Yeah, let's do the second poll if folks would jump over there. And which PM style do you most identify with?
I don't see the new poll.
If you scroll down, you probably have to
okay. It's one
scroll down
below.
the
I
screen
see.
a little bit. Yeah, so if you're in the polls section under session, then just be sure you scroll down to see the second question set. It's like manager is most popular right now, but again, a pretty broad mix. And George, my experience too is depending on the project, you might play a different style.
Absolutely. Then normally when I've done this poll, what I'll do is say, give me your top one. And then in the comment section, give me your list ranked. So I usually do it 2 ways. And the one that I normally see winning out over time is the pragmatist. But I see managers winning out here. This is good distribution.
Yeah.
See if there's anything I see different.
So no philosopher, no executive.
That's not too unusual, yeah. The executive and the philosopher were always the 2 lowest scoring when I've done this on PMI. Good stuff. Okay.
And team, as George is going through his content as well, in the Q&A section, if a question comes to mind, post your question there, and then I'll be sure it gets relayed to George for a response.
Okay, we're going to now look at the 4 strategies for managing remote and distributed teams that I have chosen for you. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at is challenge-based leadership. Now, this is a way of working that produces the knowledge one needs to achieve what I call objective success, and that is quantifiable, sustainable success, which means that type of success that is measurable and continues for the life of the deliverable. Now, what it's not is success that is measured by the mere fact that you created a deliverable, dropped it off, and of course called it good. So objective success is our goal in everything that we're talking about today. Architectural awareness. This is a path for navigating domains for project managers and team members. And this is not the technical architectural concept, right? This is where an architecturally aware individual, they're understanding the problem space through what we call architectural knowledge. What is that? That's that big picture knowledge that focuses on the strategy and the structure of domains versus the more granular knowledge that we often find in our requirements coffers. And that granular knowledge is the main reason in my history that I understand where projects get lost in the weeds. So getting that high level knowledge really can give you that path to objective success. And that's what I call architectural awareness. Then we have project plumbing. This is a strategy to prepare your project for managing negative corporate politics. In general, the project culture, especially at PMI, traditionally viewed corporate politics as the dark side, a realm that a project manager should never, ever go at all costs. We recognize its existence. We tend to believe that the PMO, and maybe they will, be able to solve it. Maybe our charter covers all of the dotted every I, crossed every T, and that we believe that will cover it. But in reality, it rarely does. So we need a strategy to manage the beast of corporate politics, especially with remote teams, because a lot of times you're just not as plugged in. And then we are going to talk about, if we have time now, since I blew up about 5 minutes, we're going to be talking about pre-formal development modeling, which provides a knowledge foundation that I like to say fuels, jumpstarts, and energizes your remote teams. Now, this type of modeling, let me qualify it, is driven by the project manager, where in contrast, right, the traditional modeling is driven by that technical delivery leadership. And let me further say, before you start going, this doesn't make sense. This is an approach that is valid for all delivery approaches, whether it be predictive, adaptive, or of course, anywhere in between. Now, if I were to guess, I would really say that you're shaking your head at this point, and you've never heard of these approaches, and I know you haven't unless you've read my articles. And they're meant to be the names are meant to be out there. But when we get into them, I'm hoping that you will be able to glean their value and thinking a little bit out of the traditional PM box. Let's go ahead and just do a little bit of time makeup here. Let's do that. Okay. So let's talk about challenge-based leaders. Now, what does a challenge-based leader do? They leverage challenge-based discourse and resolutions to obtain agreements and understandings, which we'll be discussing next. A challenge-based leader, they recognized the need to question that which is known, as unvetted knowledge cultivates failure. Now, when I say the word failure, I'm really talking about not meeting the original objective, because projects often have what I call failure sensors, right? Where the business owner may redefine what success was originally defined as. So when I say failure, it just means falling short of an original objective. 4, and they practice the art of being wrong for the sake of determining that which is right. That will make more sense here in just a little bit. The bottom line, and this is really important, challenge-based leaders recognize that the quality of a solution will directly correlate to the quality of knowledge that fuels the solution, right? Hence, they invite challenges to the knowledge that enters their project domain, because you can never assume that what you have been handed, even the normal due diligence, is good. You got to be able to challenge that knowledge, and this is what this is all about. Okay, let's talk about challenge-based discourse. What is that? Well, it's the primary tool that we used to attain agreements and understanding in challenge-based resolutions. And what are its qualities? Well, it uses dialectic contention. It's a fancy word, but it's a method or style of discourse where two people holding or representing different points of view will challenge the veracity or truth, of a position through what? Through reasoned argumentation. You might have heard of this in some ways as productive arguing. For this process to work, challenge-based discourse should be an assumption-free zone, meaning that accepted truths, right, should be challenged, like we discussed. So when there is no contention or disagreement on something, the leader or the team, once they get used to this, needs to offer a contrarian opinion and advocacy, okay, so that they can truly challenge and vet, right, that believed truth. Now, for this type of process to work, there needs to be a sense of psychological safety. This is a word that gets used a lot nowadays. It must be present within the group, as without it, these received engagements, you might have likely been forced, because for some people, they may feel uncomfortable doing this challenge-based process. Now, for me, challenge-based discourse, when we go through it, we actually make it kind of a game. It's actually kind of a team building exercise at any given time. So we actually make it a little bit lively and peppy. It's not anything super serious, but we get super serious things done. And some key principles, okay? Now, you may consider this one a little touchy-feely. So hang on to your seat just a moment. So what you feel on a subject is, valid and accepted in challenge-based discourse. However, what you resolve to understand that is agreed to may be different, and both being true at the same time, simultaneously true, is compatible. In other words, this will make more sense here in just a minute. When one resolves to agree to something, that does not necessarily mean that they're truly in complete agreement, because what they feel may be different, and that should be recognized and accepted as a normal and acceptable place to be when you're doing challenge-based discourse. Now, I know this may be insulting, right, for some, but I found this principle valuable. So let me give you an example. When trying to reach an agreement when there is a deadlock, right, whether you're challenging requirements or there's a problem on the floor, you're all hands on deck, whatever it is, you simply ask with respect this question after you've tried and tried in your deadlock. Is this what you feel, or is this what you know? Now, it's not insulting. And have them describe what it is they feel. Stop right there. And then they will tell you what they feel, because that to them is the knowledge. Then have them describe what they know. And almost always there's a difference between the two. And this is where you can find a resolved understanding. Once you distinguish between what you're feeling, which to most people means everything, right? It's the truth, it's the absolute, right? But when you challenge it, there's usually some degree of separation. And that's where you can find a resolved understanding. Hopefully that makes sense. So there are no winners or losers in challenge-based discourse. Now, that's because challenge-based discourse, it requires those contra viewpoints, and it requires that contention to mine and refine knowledge to the next level. This is where I said, one is encouraged to be wrong for the sake of determining that which is right. So really, it's really hard to actually determine. If you wanted to, who won, who lost, you just can't determine it. There is no such things as winner or losers in a challenge-based discourse. And the last principle, you need to have empathetic understanding, because that reveals knowledge. So to challenge a position, right, you're not going to be mean, you're not going to be aggressive, right? You need to be empathetic. You must understand their basis. And to understand their basis of belief, one must have the insight, and to have that clarity of insight in them, you must empathetically understand their perspective. And from here, that knowledge becomes revealed. So you just put these three principles together and you can come to consensus. It really works, but you got to kind of you do it differently depending on the dynamics of your team, but it makes a big difference. So challenge-based discourse is a tool that we use in challenge-based leadership. So what are challenge-based resolutions in this process? Well, that's the method within challenge-based leadership that resolves, that is, finds a resolution to a problem or concern. It accomplishes this through a process that I've nicknamed challenge-scaping. Although sounding complicated, it will make more sense as we just bounce through it real quick. So what are the phases in challenge-based resolutions? Well, the first phase is called the problemscape, where the concern, problem, or question is defined. What do you mean is defined? Well, first look at the steps down below. It says steps within each phase: discovery, refinement, composition, right? Why are we doing this? Because in our business, assumptions really do derail the ability to achieve objective success. And in this case, we go as far to say that the problem, right, that is given to us may not be the problem at all. I know you've come across this. It doesn't matter if the problem was given to you by the executive management team, the business sponsor, the most trusted analyst in the company. Everything needs to be challenged. And it should go without saying that when you challenge something and it doesn't hold out, a reset may be required in the process. So if you look, there's an icon here showing a circular iterative type process. That's because when you do this process, you have to reset sometimes and rechange your thinking. The knowledge scape, the next phase, right? And as the steps mentioned, we discover, we refine, and we compose the knowledge for the next phase, which is what? The solution scape. And of course, again, you discover, you refine, and you compose the solution. So let's go through this in just a one walkthrough, okay? So phase one, the problemscape. So through discovery, right, participants uncover the known problem descriptions. They discover them. What are those descriptions? Then they refine them through what? Refine through challenge-based discourse. That's what we just talked about. And you create an agreed upon understanding, a consensus per se. The output of the problemscape, right, then feeds into the knowledgescape. So what happens in the knowledgescape? Well, in the discovery step, we have to understand the problem. So the group, what? They got to gather all the knowledge. So you pour the knowledge in. What does that mean? Well, first you say, what is explicitly known? What is the explicit knowledge? Well, that would be like the documented knowledge that you have. It may not be right, but it's explicit. Then you have tribal knowledge. And that is that undocumented knowledge that's often, in your functional groups, not documented. It's just tribal. And then you have tacit knowledge, which is that more implicit form, like wisdom, experience, the insight, the intuition. So you discover everything there is about it. What's the next step? We refine that knowledge. How do you refine? Through challenge-based discourse. That discovered knowledge is then mined into what I call the elemental form, allowing errant and contextually incorrect information to become visible and sifted from the intake. The remaining elements become, just think of it this way, as information pay dirt. You're starting to see the analogy, right? Which provides the purchasing power to achieve objective success through the solution. So envision a mining operation, right? Where a front loader is picking up massive amounts of material And what is that material? That's information. And they're pouring it into a sifter of some type that strips out the unwanted knowledge and only allows the appropriate knowledge elements to fall through. That is the information pay dirt. All of this is analogy, but it's really just practical stuff. Then in KnowledgeScape, you compose. So from the sifted information elements that pay dirt, we assemble what we now know to be the true picture of knowledge. And then you got to document it. So you create like a life cycle knowledge view, or you draw it out on the whiteboard if you're trying to solve an immediate problem. This is the method for passing, right, that refined knowledge to the next phase. So you cleanse all the knowledge, you got those basic elements, then you recombined it into something that is understandable, and then you pass that into your solutionscape, right? And what did we do in the solutionscape? With the problem understood, right? Because we did the problemscape, we really understand it now. And with the distilled knowledge in our hand, we now need to discover, first step, any proposed solutions of records, because you and I both know that business owners already have a vision for what they want, what they think they want, right? And then of course, IT always has a vision. Everybody has a vision. What are those? Discover what those are, and then challenge those proposed solutions against what? Against our resolved understandings. Meaning, does that solution solve the problemscape, right, that we just resolved to, right? Does it solve the or fit into the knowledgescape as well? And then what you do is through refining or creating something new, a brand new solution, right? You then document that. So hopefully you see this is actually, even though it's kind of maybe a little complex talking it through, it's just a simple structured problem process to define a problem, gather the correct knowledge, and define the correct solution. It's just making the point that every step of it needs to be challenged. So now you see why challenge is my favorite word. Okay, next one is architectural awareness. Now, why do we need architectural awareness? Well, I originally developed this, and I call it the double A, because I wanted an approach that would allow me to be functionally relevant in the domains that I interacted with as a project manager. Now, domains, they can be all over the place. You could be just talking about business. You could be talking about IT. But in the business, you may be talking about logistics, finance, accounting, contracts. It goes on, right? And usually you have many domains. I understood that it was not feasible or prudent for me to become a specialist, right, in each knowledge area. It's just not the right thing to do. However, if I focused on the strategy and the structure of the domain, and what is that? That's that perspective at a 30,000-foot level where I can see end to end. I can see how it's built. I can see the principles. Then I would be able to, three things: understand, interpret, and communicate with the material acumen, right? Increasing what? The opportunity to achieve objective success as the PM. Then I realize, right, that this could also have immense value to the outputs of remote teams for their productivity and for the quality. Because if they could also get up there to that 30,000-foot level, see end to end, man, that would just be a game changer. Hopefully you're seeing that. So what are its qualities? Well, number one, as you can see by that image, is anchored in the principles of the PMI Talent Triangle. So there's a philosophical camp in project management that believes we put ourselves at risk, right, or a conflict of interest if we participate in activities or discussions beyond technical project management, that little blue piece right there, right? But that blue piece before 2016, when this was built, used to be the whole, largely, right? Although I understand this long-held perspective, it does not align with now the 2016 shape of this, because now we have leadership, we have strategic and business management, right? So architectural awareness fits right into leadership and strategic and business management. And I've been practicing this and selling architectural awareness for much longer than before 2016. What else does it do? It enhances your capability to lead through influence. Now, PMs and teams who possess this big picture knowledge, and they can communicate within and across the domains, right? They will garner influence that increases participation in their projects, increases the knowledge in your projects. Number 3, increased agility when responding to change. So when change does occur, the project burden and effort to respond to it is greatly reduced if you have this architectural awareness. But more importantly, if you use architectural awareness, change occurs less frequently. That's an important piece. Improved collaboration and communication, we discussed that. And it increases the productivity, quality, and the mitigation of rework when embedded in the onboarding curriculum. So how can you, people ask me, how do I use this in a practical way? Well, I say, actually have kickoff courses for your projects called architectural awareness. You invite the business, you invite IT, everybody, and you work on building that big picture, end-to-end system view type knowledge for the overall team. And guess what? You know, it may take a day, it may take 2 days, but the payoff is immense as everyone learns to communicate and understand above those weeds that we get caught in. So I'm hoping that makes sense. So the bottom line, architectural awareness is I mentioned this, didn't I? A project realization game changer, and that supercharges your ability, as with all of these, to achieve objective success. And let's just take one more slide into the architectural knowledge dive. Okay, and what does this mean? So to be architectural awareness is functionally realizable when you can demonstrate that architectural knowledge. So what is architectural knowledge? When do you have it? Well, you got to be able to understand, which means obviously you can acquire and comprehend the domain knowledge. Well, of course, everybody can do that. You got to be able to interpret it. That's where you raise it from the weeds to that strategic and structural level. And then you need to be able to communicate that knowledge through visualization and to a degree in the audience vernacular. I call this UIC, right? Over here, you can see in the head, understand, interpret, and communicate. So then I realized, you know what? There are actually competency levels of this, right? So let's look at these levels. Level 1, collaborate. That's the lower level. At this level, you can comprehend, keep up with, and you can participate in the discussions going on in the domain, right? This is the level at which you want your entire team to be at. And when you have this as part of your onboarding, this is the level you're targeting. Then we have 2 additional levels. We have the moderate level. This represents ability, usually for the PM or the leads, to be able to debate through acumen, meaning you have a keen insight view. That 30,000-foot view is really a keen insight view. That a lot of times, those SMEs, those people who work within that domain, they get lost in their own weeds. So having a PM who is up above, not the expert, but they're able to see end to end, makes a humongous difference. The third level is the ability to challenge, right? And that's where it's a competency that states you have principled level knowledge of the subject matter. And you can challenge even the experts within the domain. And as I mentioned, you yourself are not the expert, but instead you're kind of an expert of that big picture. You may understand more about the principles and theory of what they're talking about than they do, because you're looking at it from a different perspective. You're not in the everyday battle that they're fighting. So you give them a different perspective that they learn to what? To appreciate. And then you get all those benefits. Okay, corporate politics, everybody's favorite topic. It's actually one of mine. So this slide might be a little controversial for some, as it provides a perspective of our profession that many of you will feel the need to disagree with. Okay, I know that I absolutely disagreed with the principles that I had here earlier in my career. And I fought it. And then I had to say, you know what? This is killing me, right? I was doing international projects. I was flying back and forth in Europe all the time. The politics was just killing me. So I had to come up with some strategies. So let's define corporate politics the George Freeman way. What is the purpose of corporate politics? Well, it exists to achieve change within an organization. Okay. It's generally accepted to be a positive politic when the change is purposed to benefit the organization, and is considered a negative form when the change is purposed to benefit an individual, right, without regard to the organization. Now, what is the purpose of project management? We all know this one. At a very high level, it exists to drive change. Uh-oh, here's a math problem. What does A plus B equal? It means project managers are agents of change. Here's the scary part. We're part of the political apparatus of the organization. Now, many of you go, no, duh, George, I knew that. But a lot of people don't. So what does this functionally mean for me as a PM? So these are what I created as rights. You have the right to be politically aware as a PM. The right to defend your project through political means, of course, if your management allows it. The right to project success through leveraging the corporate politic. So if you lean towards the purist side, the PM, project management, you will disagree with this slide largely. So what does this have to do with remote and distributed teams? Well, I'm glad you asked. Stakeholders who practice this art of corporate politics, the negative form, right, view remote and distributed teams as, in a way, an easy prey. In other words, they can get away with an awful lot. And because of that, remote and distributed teams are very vulnerable to this, maybe more so than being present. Okay, so that's the reason for the correlation to our world that we're talking about. Now let's get into the meat of the strategy. What is the primary motivation for negative politics? If we had more time, I would be polling that, but it's, in my mind, self-preservation based, and it's rooted in one's fear of change for that negative politic. Now, I've even coined a phrase to represent the favored strategy of those who act out their fear of change. And get ready for this one. It's a little bizarre, but epistemic subterfuge. This embodies the idea that with full knowledge, there are individuals and currents within maybe your organization that rationally justify some degree of passive aggressive behavior to covertly achieve a contra goal to the one they are presenting themselves in alignment with. That's the passive aggressive piece. That's the subterfuge, right? In other words, those who are dark side practitioners of corporate politics will almost always present themselves in alignment with the goals and objective of a project that you are putting forth. And then they will use those passive aggressive techniques to undermine your ability to what? To reach objective success. Stated differently, they want you to be successful, but they will steer you to success redefined, representing outputs that miss the mark. And here's the key part, or more precisely stated, misses the mark, which is their domain. In other words, don't change anything in my world. My boss said I have to be in alignment. I'm in alignment, but they're a saboteur at some level. They may be a great person, but they're fearful, right? So how can we prepare our projects to manage these type of events? Well, if you start looking at the little picture there, we need to map the political influence pipelines of the organization related to your project, indicating the direct and the indirect influencers of your project. The direct ones are those who have reporting roles of some type in your project. They have some type of formal responsibility. They may just be there as a SME, it doesn't matter, but they're in the project. Whereas an indirect influencer, this is the key ones, are outside the project. But guess what? They have some form of influence over those who are directly involved. So keep that in mind. They're key to this approach. You need to strategically determine where to place cutoff valves. So follow the metaphor. So you see there are valves in that pipeline on your screen. So you got to determine where to put those. Why do you need those? Well, you need them in case of a political waste emergency. And you really want to put these valves in the indirect influencer's office. I'm going to show you a diagram in a bit. 3, you need to negotiate mutual understandings with the influencers holding the office, right? Where the cutoff valves are being installed. And this is a lesson learned, so hear this one. It is highly advisable to install remote pressure gauge monitors at these locations, as a burst pipe could turn your influencer's office into a wasteland, causing undesirable consequences. So these influencers who agree to be there for you in case there is negative corporate politics put themselves in a little danger. But you know, most executives, and usually these are executives, they love the corporate politics. They love to play the game. If you ever have lunch with them, they're talking corporate politics, right? It's their game. They love it. It's not hard to get help in this arena. And again, this is all being done right before your execution phase begins, so that you're prepared in case of this need. So you execute your project. Practical example, please, right? So this is a political influence diagram that I've created. Okay. I know you probably can't see the pointer. Originally, I was going to have a pointer, but you'll see that these little circles have dotted ones, and then you have solid ones. The solid ones are your direct influencers who are involved in the project, right? Their size, right, are important to you. The size of the circle, the actual line, may show their influence level. And the dotted circle is the indirect influencers. So if you look at this, right, you'll see the SW has an influence over TM, who's that red circle. I made him red because then this example, this is our person who's making life difficult in our project, right? So I pre-identified who can influence anybody else and who's involved and who's not involved. So the goal is to set up these cutoff valves in the indirect influencer's office. And if the pipes start to build up, that political garbage starts to flow, you go to that indirect influencer that you pre-negotiated an arrangement with, and they help you out, right? They're able to turn off that valve and help your project, and they will enjoy it. It's fun for them. Okay. How are we doing on time, Brian?
We got about 4 minutes left.
Okay. So I'm going just to quickly hit this one hard. Pre-formal development modeling. This is modeling done by the project manager, and it challenges assumptions, produces actionable knowledge, it identifies gaps. All these things, are very important, but it puts this type of modeling, right, in the direct realm of the project manager. So there are two phases of modeling, right? That pre-formal development that we're talking about, and the traditional modeling done by technical delivery teams, right? The bottom line is that PFD modeling is a reasonable due diligence that really makes a difference for setting a foundation for your remote and distributed teams. And what's involved in those, right? Traditional things. Let me just throw these up. We're not going to dig into them. But being able to do storyboarding, right? Whether this is an agile-based project, hybrid, it doesn't matter. This reasonable due diligence makes all difference. Now, agile purists are going to disagree with you. They're going to think this is a slippery slope to a waterfall, right? They're going to think many things about this. This is not needed. This goes against agile-based principles, but no, it's not. This is just reasonable due diligence. I do this on every single project. Now, depending on your environment, you may need to create a separate project for this. You may need to have it as a step within your project. For my world, I have the capability to do PFD type modeling as part of the definition process in creating my charter and such. And we will do a small team, usually 2 to 3 people, and we will do the due diligence, lay this out, and then we give this information to feed into the normal life cycle. So it gives you a jump start, and that makes a big difference in knowledge for your remote and distributed teams. So I had a lot more prepared on that, but let's go ahead, Brian, and jump into questions.
And George, there are no questions in the Q&A queue. If there's anyone that has questions, now's the time to submit your question. We got like about 2 minutes left with George today.
I must have put everybody asleep except for the dog. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like we're good to go. So if you want to just start with the wrap up.
Yes. So you can, if you wanted to reach out to me, you can scan that QR code and you can connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have questions later, you'll go ahead and message me on LinkedIn, the place where I hang out there. But most of the time I'm on PMIsprojectmanagement.com. But connect with me on LinkedIn. And thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope you got something out of it.
Thank you, George. Hey, George, there is one question from Kevin. And he asked, based on project size, how long does it take for how long is PFD?
Well, it depends on the complexities and the questions that are being asked, right? For very risky projects, I will be spending usually 2, 3, 4 weeks in PFD, and to really challenge out what is known, what is not known. But a lot of times on a very low, not very risky project, not too big, there's a week's worth of work in working with a 2 to 3 person team to throw that together.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, George, again, thank you for your time today. For the team, as usual, the recording, the notes, what George presented, we'll be sharing that out in email soon. So watch your inbox for that. Thanks everybody for their participation today, and have a good rest of your day. George, thank you.
Okay, thank you.